Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, back with something that I haven't done for quite a while, close to 7 years, when I used to do these live rapid-fire critiques over the Skypey McSkyperson, where I had the photographer call in, I had their images, and I would do a live rapid-fire critique. Well, now that we've got the live box going again, I'm going to do that right now with somebody I know from the YouTube, actually from the Instagrams. We've got Lindsey Michelle here, and she's going to introduce herself in just a minute. But the point of me making this video is it's very similar to what I did with Sam Green when I helped him get into photo school. Lindsey's not trying to get into photo school, but it was a great opportunity back then with Sam for me to help him become a better photographer, and Lindsey's interested in becoming a better photographer as well. So that's exactly what we're going to do here, and hopefully follow the steps through a couple-month process, and maybe I'll do this with more of you guys. So if you're interested in being mentored over the internet like this, well, go ahead, leave a comment down below, and maybe I'll pick you and we'll do this thing as well. So Lindsey, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to get my photos critiqued. I'm a neuroscience researcher, which was kind of a tangent. I started school as a film major and then put my camera down because I got distracted by neuroscience, ended up doing that. So that's what I do full time now. But then outside of that, I pretty much fill all the time that I have with art, either making it myself or creating opportunities for others to make it. I run the Boston Creative Collective, which is a pretty new community-based organization here in Boston. We focus on getting student artists linked up with local businesses and local startups so that they can find the artists they need and artists can find paying jobs, which of course we are always looking for as just getting started in the creative industry. So I got into photography because I'm a model. And there's a lot of photo meetups in Boston. So then I basically was always going as a model. And then I was like, hey, I'm going to bring my camera that I used to use for film back in the day. And then I just started taking photos and loved it. And so for the past almost 4 months, I've been shooting, now that it's colder a little less, but back when it was warm, probably 2 or 3 times a week, just shooting at meetups or just finding models in Boston, and a little bit addicted to it. And I love it. So
what are you shooting with? What cameras, what lenses? What are you shooting with?
You're going to laugh. Okay, so I have a T4i. So it's this guy right here. And some of my favorite lenses are my 24-70 and then my 40 prime. Those are what I'm usually shooting with. That's pretty much my setup. And then I add it in Lightroom and then Photoshop.
So it's a 24-70 2.8?
And
yes, it's the 40 millimeter pancake 2.8, correct?
Yes, yeah.
All right, yeah, that's a cool little lens. Are you shooting RAW or are you shooting straight up JPEG?
I am shooting in RAW.
Okay, good, because if you weren't, I was going to have Dan cut the feed real fast and be like, what is going on here?
Shut the internet down.
You sent me 15 images. It looks like you're into shooting portraits. Yeah. Is that the case? Is that what you like to do? More setup, more working with models?
So I guess that's kind of just how it has played out, just because a lot of these meetups, you have a lot of models coming that are dressed in really cool clothing. And so that seems to be what's most accessible right now. I would love to, if I had a chance, get into more production heavy stuff. So where you're actually playing with lighting and doing really cool artistic sort of editorial shots. But for right now, natural lighting is kind of what I have to work with. But I did throw in a couple of little weirder shots that I've been taking, and I do like those. I just haven't had much opportunity to continue with that work.
All right, so we're going to jump into these photos. I'm going to tell you straight up what's on my mind. We'll just do that, and we'll get to this first one right here. So you're using the 24-70 to do portraits, so this was obviously with, well, actually I can't say obviously, this was with the 24-70. What was this, the 24-70 or the 40?
No, this is the 40 prime.
So it's the 2.8. Yeah, so compositionally I'm pretty cool with it in terms of how much headroom there is. It's not straight up tight to the top of the frame, which isn't really a good look most of the time. I always leave just a little bit, or I think this is honestly the good amount of headroom. Exposure wise, how are you shooting? You shooting manual, you shooting aperture priority?
I am shooting entirely manual with autofocus. So I just do I fix my focus point and then shift my camera over.
So you're doing single point.
But everything else is
right,
manual.
Single point AF. With models, I do not like when they put their arms up and put their hand up. It becomes a very passé thing. It's something that's been done a ton, and it's like, hey, put your arms up, run the hands through your hair type of thing. This one, it's to me, it's like you lose that hand, so it's like now she just has like a wrist coming out of her head, because it's chopping it off at the wrist, and the elbow got cut off a little bit, which isn't that big of a deal. In terms of processing, I think the processing looks pretty good, but there's not a lot of light in the face. So it looks like you have more of the light off the sun, in this case, off to the side. Is there any reason why you chose to shoot it that way?
So in terms of thinking behind this shot, I'm sad to say there probably wasn't a lot. This was the very first shot that I took, the very first shoot that I was at. This is my photographer who was actually taking photos of me. So I just turned the camera around, but I had seen a lot of photographers playing with sort of the halo of light behind models' heads. And so I was trying to get a little bit of that. So that was kind of the thinking behind that.
In terms of exposure, that's really good for just going out there and shooting in manual and getting that exposure right. That's good. So I'm gonna move on to the next one, see what we got. So this is a lower light situation. We're under an overpass, it looks like.
Yeah. So this,
Well, I was gonna say I'm not a super duper fan of this one. Well, one, his eyes aren't even open for the most part, it looks like, or is it mid blink? He looks to be in mid blink.
Yeah. So I actually chose this photo because of that. I shot this a couple days before Halloween, and I kind of like that it's a little bit creepy, and I like that his eyes are halfway open, and that was definitely an artistic choice. I have some photos of this where his eyes are perfectly open or perfectly closed. So this was definitely a stylistic choice, and the lighting underneath this overpass was green from one side and red from the other, so you got some pretty cool lighting effects.
Sure.
So,
no, I get it, and it's hard to argue with an explanation like that. It just doesn't stand out as like, hey, this is a fantastic portfolio type of image. For the lighting in the face, or the lack thereof, especially with the light coming in from the back, you can see it's daylight coming in, hitting from the back, and the eyes. Even if the eyes were open, I don't think it changes the image as being good or better than what it is. And it's more. So with posing, it's harder to get the candid aspect of it. It's harder to be like, I'm doing a posed, candid type shot. But this is something where you could have him walk in and have some kind of movement in him, and then you can stop him and try to make it feel more natural. This one is not one that I would be throwing into my portfolio personally, based off of those reasons. All right, let's move on. Compositionally, I see this as good. Focus-wise, it's not in focus, right? It missed
a little soft.
But the thing is, it's actually focused somewhere else. It looks like it's focused on the chest, to be honest with you. That looks like where the focus is, but also there may be a little bit of movement. Do you know what your settings were?
I can check it out in Lightroom.
Yeah, check that out.
Quick.
You can have that open. And I'll just keep going with a little bit of the critique. One of the things I see in this is I don't mind where the wrought iron is placed. I just think there may be more focus happening, like looking straight down at the image more so than looking at the top for the face, because I'm kind of distracted by the bottom of it for some reason. The first thing I get to see is like the wrought iron. So maybe if there was just a little less of that, I wouldn't want to cut her hands off, but maybe slightly below the knees. I could probably just show this. I can get in there and do something like that. That I think could work, because then it's less of a focus on that dead space at the bottom and more so on the top. Do you know the settings now?
Yeah. So it is, and I think we were right in it being movement, because it's 1/80. It was pretty dark, so I dropped it down. So it's 1/80 for the shutter speed. The f is 2.8. ISO is 400, which probably could have been bumped up a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, 1/80th.
And this was on the 24 to 70.
All right. Well, you shouldn't be. So 1/80th of a second at 2.8, 400 ISO. You could definitely bump that up, even with the camera that you're using. But even if you didn't want to go higher, you could do 640. Actually, that camera doesn't do 640, I don't think. Excuse me. I think it would do 800. It does one stop at a time. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of exposure, 1/80th of a second is starting to really, if she moves quickly or something along those lines, especially if you miss the focus. Look, honestly, if you didn't miss the focus, I think it would have been fine at 1/80th of a second. You just want to be careful hand holding longer than that. So if you're out at 70 millimeters with a crop sensor camera, you may want to be at 1/125th of a second or something like that. So you're not falling into that rule of the rule of thumb is that you don't shoot slower than your focal length. So if it's a 200 millimeter lens, you don't want to be at 1/125th. Generally speaking, you can get away with it if you have good stability or image stabilization built into the lenses. But in this case, it's more so the composition coming in a little closer, cutting the knees right below the knee, like I showed you, and obviously nailing the focus. I also think that another good composition for something along these lines. No, that's a bad box I was drawing. Could be along the lines of I hate chopping hands off, but that could kind of work. That looks like a good aspect ratio right there. I think that could have made for a better looking image.
It's funny that you're commenting on the crop because I have all the crops you're mentioning. There are versions of the photo that look like that. And I think I chose this one because I really like the lines in the background, the white and the blue, and then to the just like the spread of them. But I can see now how it could be a little distracting, particularly on the bottom. So it's helpful to think about.
Yeah, I just think I just think that the bottom is pretty much dead space. There's not much. I don't need to see her knee sticking. Well, now that I see it sticking through there, I still really don't need to see that. I think the focus is more up on her. And I'll leave that at that. So I'll move on to the next one. The exposure for this is really good. The composition is good. I think there's a little too much headroom, but again, it's not a deal breaker at all because it's close. And that's just nitpicking at this point. I love the colors. I like the tones. I love the way this one is processed and edited.
It's funny you like the colors in this because this photo out of camera was almost pitch black. It was so dark because it sunsets in like 3 p.m. in Boston now. So I'm happy that you like that aspect of it because that's all constructed. So the settings for this are 1/60. Again, super low this time on purpose because it's super dark. F-stop 2.8, ISO 800 on 55 millimeter on the 24-70.
Okay. You could probably get away with bumping the ISO in this case, but even 1/60th still works, and it definitely did work. But you said you brought it back quite a bit in the raw file?
Yeah, it was almost completely dark, and you couldn't see any of the detail at all.
So that means you got your exposure wrong, basically, right?
Yeah, but I'm not sure how you could make it. So my exposure is 1/60. That's already super duper slow.
It's not super slow. But...
So I don't think I could really have brought that. When people are moving, just people in general, even if they're just like a little bit, have a little bit of motion, it's hard.
Well, yeah.
But I'm not sure what you'd recommend if there's.
Well, if he's going to be moving, that's where you're better off bumping the ISO if he's moving, so that you get more shutter speed, so that you can, so then you can freeze the motion better. It's one of those situations where. Do you want to have motion blur, or would you rather have a little bit more noise or grain in the image? And I'm a person that doesn't worry too much about noise or grain. Even on a T4i, it's not a problem. Like, it doesn't bother me. But there's this idea today that if there's any noise or any grain, that it's terrible. But it's not the case, because I look at the image. I mean, this image is pretty darn clean. It's pretty clean for the most part. Again, though, I think your focus is off. It looks like it's nice and sharp on his jacket, but it's what focus mode are you in?
So I think that's a question I don't know how to answer, and I have been playing a lot with focus mode. So I think this is one of my earlier shots too, and I thought it was like you put the little red dot on the face and then you hold halfway down and then move. That's what I was doing, but I think that wasn't quite right. I don't think that was actually what was happening because I do notice in a lot of my photos. The focus point shifts away. So I think I need to play with that a little bit more to understand how that all is working.
Yeah, so you have two settings on that camera. You've got the continuous focus you've got manual, you've got continuous focus, and you've got single focus. One's called servo, which is continuous focus. That means wherever you put the red box, if you hold the button halfway down, it's going to constantly refocus and focus as the subject is moving. If you put it on single focus, then you're going to lock your focus in and then recompose is what you're talking about doing. That would then allow you to focus, recompose. But if the subject moves at all, especially at 2.8, then the focus is going to be off and shift. So if he's moving for portraits like this, that's where I'm going to want to do continuous focus, putting the focus point near his eye, because you always want to focus on the eyes for these portraits. And if he's not moving, then you can do the single focus point. I like to have the focus beep on, and I focus on his eye, lock in, don't move, don't recompose, and then boom, take the shot.
My question is, you said on the single focus, basically when you push halfway down, it sets the distance to the focus, and then you can move the frame around and it'll stay at that distance. For the continuous focus, does it continue to focus as sort of like, how does that work? Is it continuing to focus on the center of the picture, or is it continuing to focus on where you placed the focus originally?
It's where you move the focus point. So it's where the red box or the black box, whatever color it ends up being. If it's continuous focus, it's going to continuously focus on where that box is, as long as your fingers press halfway down. And so that's why for portraiture, for most,
so you'd have to move the box.
You move the box. Yes, you
have to move the red dot.
Yep, you quickly move the red dot with your thumb on the back of the camera, and you move the dot that way. Now, if the person isn't moving, that's where you get into single. And I still like moving the focus point, so I don't lock in and then I do lock in and recompose in certain situations, but I also have 153 focusing points in the camera that I use. But if I was using one of these that only had 6 focusing points, I would get the focus point as close to where I want it, lock in, recompose without moving forward, without moving back. And if they move, that could bone your focus as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting.
All right, moving on. This is good. Well, the first thing I was drawn to was her face. Focus-wise, this one looks a little better. I don't have the full res images here. The only thing that gets me on an image like this is the cutting off of the hands. You're cutting off the hands right here. That is, it's kind of one of those no-nos. You could take a step back, pull back a little bit, and get those hands in there. Or if you don't get the hands in there, a good composition would be along the lines of, you see how that, like a composition like this? So
gotcha.
So you have that, and you see, even when I'm doing this, even here I'm leaving even to the left, even to the right, but that's a place where you'd want to shoot it. You could always come up a little bit and, you know, take a step in, go a little bit like this too. Then you could also go like this for a horizontal. I like to say horizontal. And there, and a little bit of rule of thirds, throw her off to that side. I would actually throw her off a little bit more and go like this. Something along those lines. So that gives you another look at it. So when I'm shooting, I like to look at it where I give the wides, the tights, the mediums, the details. You come in close. If she has a ring on, you get a nice detailed shot of the ring and the hand. You have the full body shot. You've got the medium length, and then you've got the tighter head shots. So I'm always thinking about different ways that I can shoot those shots, because I don't like to I don't crop at all. That is like one of the things, like 99.999% of the shots that I take are never ever cropped. The only thing is, I mean, your exposures are very nice. Your processing is very nice. The background here, you did a nice job blowing that out. It really helps to have the 2.8 lenses. You just want to not cut off the hands like this. You could also have her put her hands up on her knees. Just make sure that you don't cut them off.
Cool. I think the wide, the tight, the medium, and the details is very interesting. Like, to keep that in your mind when you're shooting. I think that would help get like a lot of variety of shots too. Yeah,
and don't forget, I mean, all these shots, all 15 you picked, are all verticals. There's nothing wrong with shooting horizontal. It's obviously dependent upon what the image looks like, but what you just said, reiterating that the wides, the mediums, the tights, and the details, if you keep that in your mind and you think about that, you can always take a step closer. You could always zoom in a little more. You could always move further back, and just giving yourself more options in full res images instead of cropping later is going to make your images much better. But no, that's a good shot as well. So this... So there's a couple of things. I mean, to me, there's a little bit too much headroom. So there's a lot of dead space up at the top. So you could have gotten a little closer if possible. I don't know where you were shooting. The composition is all right. But
I was on a boat.
It looks like it's on a boat.
Closer, yeah. Not much farther away.
It looks like it's on a boat.
Yeah.
This is one where looking off to the side is all right. It's just have her eyes come halfway between center and where they're at here, because then you just ask her to cheat it a little bit, because it's too much of a side eye to me. In terms of composition, we already talked about the headspace. Focus wise, it missed again. Focus is off. I think it's right here, actually, on her hands. The focus is down here on the banister, more so than on her. So focus is a key thing to focus on for this. Another composition wise, especially if she's going to look that way, is to utilize your rule of thirds, throw her off to the side, lock in, recompose, this isn't a good, that's not a very good crop I did right there, but you understand what I'm saying with the eyes. And then even have her look back towards you. So in this shot, I would be saying something like, all right, I like you looking over there. That's good. Bring your eyes back more towards the center, but not to me. So look a little bit to my left or right, whichever side. And then I'd be like, all right, bring your nose back to me, tilt your head a certain way, and then boom, I'd be getting a couple more shots. But focus is extremely important.
Gotcha.
This is where you got to move that focus point to the eye and either be in continuous or make sure that you're locking in every time. I personally like to use the beep in situations like this so that I can hear that I'm in focus as well. And if you've ever seen any of the videos where I'm shooting, you'll hear a lot of focus beeping. You'll hear beep, beep, beep a lot because I'm constantly halfway pressing when I'm doing single focus to make sure that I'm locked in on the eye.
Yeah, that's helpful. What is your opinion on, what are your opinion on the gradients in this photo? Because the background, when I took it, it's a super cloudy, rainy day, so the sky was ugly. Yeah. So I throw in a lot of different color gradients in here. I'm not sure what your opinion is.
That's one of the things. That's one of the things I don't like. It's very filtery. Like you've really tried hard to do that. But see, that's where if you got the composition with less clouds or less area like that, it would be better. Because I don't like one of the things I noticed was I didn't like that there was more color over here to the right than there was to the left. It just doesn't make any sense to have that color over here. And one of the sliders you can use is the highlight slider. You pull it back to the left. It will bring out some of the highlights in the sky. You could also use a gradient tool in Lightroom, which will allow you to do gradation. But to me, the focus should be right on the subject, more so than the background in this situation. But yeah, that's what I got for that one. So we'll move on to this. This exposure is tight. This focus is freaking tight. So you nailed the focus here. You nailed the exposure here. Nice I'm not going to say nice composition yet, but nice exposure, nice contrast, nice tones. I love that. And you see how she's touching her face nicely? It's like she's done this before. So she's barely touching. And so that's one of the things when you talk to subjects, especially you being a model from time to time, you know that you don't smush the face. You gently make it look like you're touching, but you're not. So that's good. I would have liked to have come in a little closer below the elbow. It's not a deal breaker. I like what's going on here. I love the way the background looks, the color and the tone. That all works out. I'm more looking at something along this line because you would still have a nice background. You'd still have, and I think this composition would be pretty good for me. But no, this is one of the better ones that I've seen so far, and I think that the focus is in there. Next time we do this
is my favorite.
All right, good. Next time we do this, I'm going to get the full res images so I can go in all the way, but nice job on that one. So this composition is spot on. I can't tell you much about that. The focus looks like you got it here. The reason you may have a tough time with focus on something like this sometimes is that it's backlit. You've got the light coming in from the back, which makes it a little harder for the camera to focus. It also makes, you actually have some lens flare down here at the bottom, which isn't, I mean, that happens with lenses, of course. But it's all right. I mean, you captured a nice moment here. It's not my favorite shot because of how the light is coming in from the back. I just think it's too much. But you captured a nice moment that whoever saw this, if you gave this image to the family, they'd be like, yeah, that's awesome. That's one of the best pictures we've seen. So I think that works out.
No, I agree with all of your comments. And this was the family's favorite photo of their daughter that I sent them. So
do I know what I'm talking about? Or do I know what I'm talking about? Is that why they call me the fro?
I would say yes.
All right. Let's move on to the next one. So this is,
I don't know if fro means like good at photos, but we'll say
no, I mean, I should have said fro knows. Does fro know? Fro nows? All right.
Yes.
This is cool. Through the glass. Same thing. I mean, the eyes aren't as far over because her head is straight this time, so that's cool. I like that we have the reflection of the crosswalk. I like that we have the clothes in the background. I would personally. All right, I'm doing something, Dan. I'm doing something. This is what I would do. This is why I'm going to ask for those raw file, the DNGs next time. I'm going to sit here and go to town on this JPEG. And this may not be the perfect edit, but this is screaming I want to be black and white more than anything, in my opinion.
What about it screams? Because I always struggle. I almost never put anything in black and white. What is your thinking that's leading to that?
Well, it's personal preference. But this one, in terms of color, it's not bad. It's just to me, it felt like a classic shot. One of those classic shots where you're like, oh, it's somebody in the window from the 1930s and it's timeless. And to me, it felt like it could work better in black and white. Part of the reason is that the color isn't very good. You know, the color's not great and there's not much you can do with this color. So that's why I like the feel of the black and white. I just think that that could work. Sometimes, and I'll say this as a sometimes, that going black and white may save your image, and it may save an image that may not be as good. It may make it better. It doesn't work all the time, and you don't want to hide things like that. What are you laughing at, Dan? Don't laugh at me off of camera. But no, so I just feel this one in black and white.
One thing I was questioning on this photo is the little smudge that's kind of next to her mouth that like is a reflection. I was questioning if I wanted to Photoshop that out, and I didn't know what your opinion on that would be because I found that distracting.
I mean, did you see it when you were shooting?
Yeah, but it was really difficult to. It kind of seemed there was a glare somewhere, no matter where I stuck the camera.
Yeah, I mean that's not something I'm taking out. I didn't even notice it until you. I mean, I knew it was there, but it didn't bother me until you mentioned it. It is something you could take out, but for me personally, I don't do a lot of retouching and I don't do a lot of taking things out, that especially something in the middle of the image, I don't really want to take that out. I'm still going right to the eyes, and now it's distracting me more now that you brought it up that it's there. So I mean, you could get rid of it, but it's part of the image. Like, to me, it's part of the image. And so compositionally, I think you're spot on. I love, is that a street light? Or no, that's a light inside. I just love images like this because
it's a light inside.
Because I mean, you're seeing two things. You're seeing what she's looking at in the reflection, and you're seeing into the store. You got buildings across the street. It's cool. So this is really good in black and white, I think.
I agree.
So gonna move on to the next one. I'm on a boat.
You are.
I'm on a boat. I mean, it's all right. I just don't have a connection to her. Like, why is she sitting on the stairs of a boat? Like, I don't get much. Compositionally, fine. I don't mind where you cut her ankles off at for the most part. I probably would have come in a little bit tighter because I think, you cut her off at the ankles. So it's that one. It doesn't bother me that much this time. But what I will point out that I like a lot in the image are the lines. I like that you use part of the bulkhead right here to. That draws me out of the frame. So you got a nice line there, draws my attention to the subject. You've got the ropes here, you've got the stairs. So there's lots of cool lines. And her hand on her head is fine, and the way that she's holding her wrist, I think, works out well. But the image to me is kind of like, take it or leave it.
Yeah, the set was difficult because it was a very weird angle to shoot at. And I have a bunch of photos here, probably like 10 different photos, and none of the angles of her body seemed to match with the angles the boat was giving me. So it was a very difficult situation to work with.
Gotcha.
So I'm not sure how you would have had her pose with these lines, if you have any suggestions for that.
I'd have to, for this one, it seems like I need to be there to try and do it. But also maybe, I can't use much of a longer lens because you don't have a longer lens at that point. I don't know, maybe go full body and see how that works out from a low angle, but then you're looking up her skirt, that may not work out. But also there's zero connection to her in this image because her eyes are closed. So there's no connection, personal connection with us. But, again, exposure, good. For the most part, you're doing really well with exposure for somebody that, did you have a lot of schooling on exposure, or you're just picking it up now?
Nothing at all. I have made all of this up as I've been going in the last few months.
Well, you're doing good. No, you're doing good there, so that's good. So, and I think from being in front of the camera, you're starting to see good. Your composition is pretty good right off the bat, which is probably a product of you being in front of the camera and seeing images that professionals have taken of you.
Yeah, I think it does help a lot. And that's a lot of the comments that I get, both of the model and like now photographer kind of. I think it does help to be able to see yourself from both sides, and it helps to know which cues to give the model. So I think that it's helpful to have stood on both sides of the lens.
All right, moving on. I'm in a bookstore and I'm out of focus. Wow. Yeah, so this one misfocused pretty bad, right?
Yeah.
I like so positives of this image, now that I've given you the one thing that stood out at me. Lighting, really good. So you did a really good job with exposure, really good job with the processing of it. I like the thick tones. I like the colors. I like how you blew out the background. The books look good back there. I'm not sure that I would position her this way, but for the composition, it could work. Is she sitting, or are you standing on top of one of those standy on top of things to get a book from a top shelf?
I think she's sitting.
So she
is sitting on the ground.
All right. So I would consider, if she's sitting, I would maybe bring it down to the shoulders. Something more like this.
Okay.
Because then you still have the books in the background. You still have the way she is. And that's still a ton of headroom in there. Or I'd even go to more of the extreme, like even more of the extreme, and have it like this, which is weird. I'm not saying that this works or is good. It's just an option to try in the future, because then you're thinking, oh, well, what is she looking at? What is she thinking about? Also, I would take that 24 to 70. I'd take a step back. I'd go to 24. I'd get down on a low angle, and I'd get her whole body in there and put her off to the right-hand side. And if her legs are out because she's sitting, then show her with her whole legs in there to the foot, and then you have a cool shot. But it's another option to have.
Yeah, I got to get this focus thing down, because I noticed my 24 to 70 specifically, it's a refurbished lens, so I feel like it might actually have an issue with focusing.
Is it a version 1?
So, because I've noticed, it's on my camera right now. It's a Sigma.
I thought you had the 26.
Is that my problem?
Well, no. I mean, the Sigmas are better and better, but it's a refurbished Sigma 24 to 70 2.8. Yeah, it's possible that is.
So
could
I'm
be solved.
thinking. So that's actually, because I've noticed all the pictures that have been in focus, they're all on my prime, and all the pictures that have been slightly out of focus are all on the 24 to 70. So I've been thinking that for a while, that I think it might be like an actual technical problem. The lens is not able to focus.
What are your settings on this one?
1/80. So it also could be a motion problem. 2.8, 400, and this is on the 24 to 70 at 55 millimeters. Right.
Now 1/80th. You can say, instead of 1/, we can go with 1/80th, because they're fractions. Well, I guess 1/, is technically a fraction, but in our world we say 1/80th, 1/125th, 1/60th.
Get me sounding like a photographer. Sounds good.
Exactly. So there's not much with the settings there. Just a little slow, but you maybe run into some issues with that lens. All right, so popping on to the next one, you got boned by this car in the background. I think that totally bones the shot, because now you have a red car going, and you're probably going to tell me you liked it for that reason, but it bones the shot, because the focus isn't the car. The focus is the girl, unless she's a model for the car, which in this case I don't feel that she is. So that's why your focus is a little better on this one. Your exposure, you seem to be shooting a lot of stuff at sundown, which is not terrible. But no, you got boned by the car. The car totally ruins it. And for the most part, it's a spot. Gotcha. It's a spot on shot. I'm just gonna do something here, because you could kind of get. Well, the car still bones it here too. But I don't mind black and white. I mean, I personally love black and white quite a bit. You can see that. I mean, to me, that processing looks all right. That's where it was. Because even the processing here, you could still do some work with the processing. This is why I'm going to get those raw files from you, so that I could sit here and tweak it a little better.
Gotcha.
But no, I mean, you got this Rembrandt lighting. That's that triangle underneath the cheek is happening a little bit, so that's nice. That's caused by the way that the light hits the nose, and you get this nice triangle over here. But no, it's totally boned by the car. I'll stick with that. Same girl. So she's got she's leaf. She's got a leaf, and so where you're totally missing is, so this is difficult to focus on the eye that's behind the leaf and get it in focus, because it's a small. You got to get the focus point right there, and sometimes it may be so minute on this type of camera that it may not be able to nail it. So for me, I would have been more happy if there wasn't a hole in the leaf and you focused in on this other eye and nailed that. Again, the exposures and composition is fine here. It's just that focus. The focus is what's killing you, because you're missing it. And we got to figure out. We got to figure out why. It could play into partly you're recomposing and she's moving, or you're moving forward or moving back after you've focused. That's why that focus beep is going to help, and constantly hear that, yes, this isn't focus. Yes, this isn't focus. When you hear the beep. So you got to be careful with that one. And we got to get your shutter speeds up a little bit, which means you may be living in the 800 ISO world sometimes, which isn't a problem, in my opinion. So moving on, same guy under the bridge.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Looks like the focus is missing again.
And besides bringing
looks like it's focused down.
up. Yeah. I was going to say, besides bringing the shadows up, most of this is actually out of camera.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind the colors. I don't mind the way that's happening. I mean, I do. I don't like the color on his face or any of that personally because of the green. But the focus, again, it's down here on the hands. Compositionally, we're good. Like, this is a good composition. It's not a... It's nicer than the one where his eyes were closed, so I do like that better. But it's okay, but it doesn't stand out to me like some of the others so far. And the colors throw me off a little bit. But focus again, focus. All right, we've got this one, which is this either super cropped or super high? Well, obviously we know it's high ISO, but what ISO were you at? Do you know off the top of your head on this one?
Super high ISO. I'm pretty sure I'm like almost maxing it out here because it was dark as hell underneath this. This is a parking garage.
Sure. So if you can find that one, that would be good. In terms of, and I'll keep talking while you're looking, but the composition is pretty good.
1600.
All right. Really? That's only 1600? Well, but
yeah.
What does the original look like? How far on the exposure did you bring it up in Lightroom?
So I brought the exposure up plus 2.75.
Oh.
So it's a lot. Yeah.
Really? And what were the settings again?
1/80, 2.8, 1/80th, 2.8, and 1600, 45 millimeter.
So you were 2 stops too dark, which means you didn't let enough light in, which means let's play the math game. So 1 stop off would have been 1/40th of a second, and then have that again to 1/20th of a second, and then you were almost 3 stops. So we'll stop at 1/20th of a second. Obviously, you can't handhold at 1/20th of a second with the way that you shot it, but that would have given you this exposure that you're looking at for the most part. So the things that you could have done, 1/80th is fine. So if you want to stop at 1/80th, and you were off by 2 stops, 2 stops of light would have to come from the ISO. In this case, you went from 1600, you would go to 3200, and then you'd be at 6400, which I'm not sure that camera even goes to. So you could get somewhere in between to go to 1/60th of a second at, say, 3200, and it would have gotten you closer to a proper exposure. But this is a better shot. Like, this is one of the better composed shots that you have. Even knowing that you were off by 2 stops, it still held up pretty well for that type of camera, but it also shows you that if you get your exposure wrong, you start to run into that noise and grain issues more than anything. So the more you get your exposure right, the less issues you run into with the noise.
So I agree. I was like kicking myself with the darkness of this photo afterwards. So,
but it's just a matter of understanding that. Like, if it comes up dark, even on the back of your screen, if you can see that, you just think about, what can I do? What's the process that I can take to make this better, to get the better exposure? That's the last shot. All right. My final thoughts on this. Well, I'd love to see some horizontal shots actually be thrown in there. But for the most part, your compositions are pretty close. Your exposures are pretty close from what I can see from the way that you've processed them. But obviously with that last one, you pushed it. The exposure was off by over 2 stops. The biggest takeaway from this is focus. Most things that you need to work on is focus. If you're going to get that beep on, even for something like this, it may be better to be in continuous focus and get that focus point on the eye as close to as possible. But if they're not moving, switch into single focus, lock in on their eye. Don't move yourself, have them not move. But if they do move or you move, that's where you're constantly going to press the button halfway down and hear that focus beep to know that you're locked in. And that's like one of those psychological things, like, yeah, I got it, boom. And then also on the back of the camera, you can zoom in and see it. I don't know. What any questions?
No, I gotta work on, focus. I've been noticing it in my own shots. I know that's one of the biggest problems that I have been having. But only on the one lens. So I'm not quite sure what that tells me about it being a technical problem versus like a technique problem, because all the photos you've seen on the 40 have been focused. I think it's helpful to talk about dead space and the cropping with the the wrought iron, specifically that picture, because I thought the wrought iron was cool. So I was like, let me keep it in the photo. But I can see how it is a distractor, particularly when my focus is also off. So it just adds like an extra thing to just take away from the subject.
Yeah, and I'll leave it with, if your focus is off, it's almost like the image isn't going to be usable. If focus is like a smidgen off, when you zoom in 1:1 and you're like, well, all right, because it's a good shot and you like it, that's a different story. But if it's just flat out off, it's not even, it's a throw it in the trash can type of thing, unfortunately. But no, I think my assignment to you going forward for the next one, I wouldn't touch the 24-70. I would just focus on just using the 42.8 and do your shots with that. I'd want to see you go out and do a shoot where you do the wides, the mediums, the tights, and show me some details, and then come back with 10 to 15 of those images again, and let's critique those from one shoot. So let's see one shoot with one model that you decide to pick. Only use the 40. We're going to work on seeing how that focuses. Work on focusing in on the eye, try the lock in and compose, and then try to do some of the continuous focus with people moving, and we'll hopefully see if that works.
Down to try. Yep. I'm excited.
All right, cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on. We will do this again. We'll follow up with anybody out there watching. Leave some comments below. I know it's a long video, but these are critiques. This is what you do. You discuss it out to try and understand what was going through the person's mind when they were shooting. What were their settings? What were they focusing on? What were they thinking? Because if you just look at a particular image, you may not get the same thing that they were going for. So with these critiques, they're meant to be slightly harsh, but try to point out the positives as much as possible. If you're going to look at somebody else's work, try to find the positives. Even if it's out of focus, find the positives. The composition is right on, your processing's good, your exposure is good as well. Now we need to nail the focus. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you guys want to check out another video, you can click up on the screen somewhere around here. And don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, share, and you can go ahead and follow Lindsey on her Instagram, which will pop up on the screen as well. And that's where we'll leave it. Thank you, Lindsey. Have a good one. And you guys as well. Jared, PolandFronosPhoto.com. See ya.